It's troubling to realize that the Greeks, the Egyptians, and the Indians had notion of cells centuries before the invention of the microscope.
Well, the first thing is that everybody, and this is everybody has the potential for genius. The human brain is far more powerful than a computer, than a supercomputer. Its potential is still not known, but every time they put a boundary on it, the brain busts through that boundary and goes further and further. So brilliance is a potential for everybody.
Let's imagine for a few moments what our life would be like if we could access, let's say, 20% of our brain's capacity. 100 billion neurons per human, of which only 15% are activated. There are more connections in the human body than there are stars in the galaxy. We possess a gigantic network of information.
Your brain has billions and billions of neurons, hundreds of billions of interconnections. It can process more than 2 million bits of information in 1 second. It doesn't forget anything you've ever seen or anything you've ever heard, which is why it's important to make sure you don't put the wrong things in there, because they always will impact upon you, subconsciously and consciously.
Well, the first thing is that everybody, and this is everybody has the potential for genius. The human brain is far more powerful than a computer.
What is your brain capable of if you actually put your mind to something? It really is quite daunting when you stop to think about it. And you know, our nation right now is in a bit of trouble, intellectually, because people don't think. People are not knowledgeable. The founders of our nation said that our system of government could only succeed with a well-educated populace. And they said once the populace becomes ignorant, they become easily led by slick politicians, and our system of government will fail. It's a very interesting prediction.
Television is a massive, mass hypnotist to the global mind. And what happens is it is implanting a belief in reality by the minute, and then once we take on that belief implanted, when information enters the eyes, we edit it on the basis of that belief. And so what the global population is subjected to, suffering from, is actually literally mass hypnosis. And when we talk about people who kind of start to see things and see the manipulation they couldn't see before, what do we say about them? What do they say about themselves? They say, I woke up. Exactly what they've done. When people start to go, hey, I can see it now, it's like someone has gone along, like the hypnotist, and clicked their fingers, and it's like, oh, I can see it now. Mass hypnosis. And that is the greatest hypnotist on the planet, and that's the basis of why it was created.
Every day, our senses are being constantly bombarded by subliminal messages that are found in TV, movies, and advertisements. The subliminal messages we are subjected to are unrecognizable by the conscious mind and only recognizable in our subconscious mind. The messages and imagery are passively absorbed and then stored in our subconscious, where propagandists deliberately implant artificial thoughts, which in turn can affect our actions and attitudes later in life. Experiments have shown that less than 1 minute after the viewer begins to watch television, the brain switches from beta-level consciousness associated with active and logical thought to alpha level, which is associated with passive acceptance and suggestibility. This is why advertisers spend billions of dollars a year on commercials as well as product placement within TV shows. Political messages are implanted in fictional TV programs as the relaxed, meditative state of the viewer is receptive to the programming.
The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed. Our minds are molded, our tastes are formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we've never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized.
And when you start to research the subliminals in advertising and television, what staggers you is not what they do and what's there, but the scale of it. I mean, it's like our consciousness is being hit by an explosion of this stuff. Because you see, this is a very interesting point. Experiments have shown that about 1.5 seconds before the conscious mind decides to take action, move its arms or whatever, speak, 1.5 seconds before it consciously decides to do that, the electrical signals have begun in the brain to do it. For me, the conscious level is the experiencer and observer of reality, but the subconscious is the creator of it, the generator of it. And this is why the Illuminati want the subconscious mind through subliminals. What does subliminal mean? It means below threshold. It's below the threshold the conscious mind picks up, but the subconscious mind picks everything up like a sponge. And therefore they are planting these thoughts into the subconscious, which then filter down into the conscious, and we think we're having our own thoughts, when actually they're implanted thoughts done at a subliminal level.
Ladies and gentlemen, this commercial is going to use subliminal advertising. Subliminal advertising.
Now, I want this to represent X-type conditioning in your life. Let it represent X-type conditioning. Let this represent the Y-type idea. Now watch. You're watching with your eyes. You don't see any change, do you, Reen? Al, do you see any change?
No, I don't.
You don't see any change. But your understanding tells you that it's not as dark as it was before I put the clear water in. Doesn't it? You see, as you impress the bigger idea, the old conditioning becomes weaker. And as we keep doing it, it becomes weaker. And it becomes weaker. And it becomes weaker. But you see, our eyes deceive us. We can't see any difference. But every time we watch the video, every time we turn on the set, every time we review the paragraph with the tape, every time we watch this idea being explained, the old conditioning becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. And if we will keep impressing it, even although it appears that everything outside is remaining the same, our inner eye of understanding tells us it's not the same, that it is becoming weaker. Now I want you to think, even although you experience some doubt and fear and anxiety, you understand what's causing that. It's the change that's taking place in the mind. That's what Paul talked about, the renewal of the mind. Now, Thoreau one time said something that is so rich with truth. He said, if you will endeavor to live the life you have imagined. That's the new idea, the why idea. He said, any person who advances confidently, and you've got to do it with confidence, and that comes with understanding. Any person who will advance confidently in the direction of their dream and endeavor to live the life they imagine. They will meet with success unexpected in common hours. Now watch this, because one day you're going to wake up and everything will have changed. Just like that. And your life will never be the same again. That's the way it works. That's called awakening.
People still today think that all entertainment to do with movies, drama, is therefore nothing more than their entertainment. It never ever was that case.
Of course, television can't perform such miracles as this, yet. But perhaps there's no harm wishing that it could.
The greatest social messages are promoted through movies and drama, high drama, through the fixation of emotive sequences, emotional sequences, not logical, factual sequences, but pushing points across in an emotional way which register and fix in the mind. So emotional content is very, very important, rather than going through an actual discussion or an argument using logic and facts. There's no debate. And when you're being downloaded through fiction, your guard is down, the sensor part of your brain is not in action. It isn't saying, yes, I agree with this, I disagree with that, as you would in a debate or a lecture. You're actually in an alpha state, being completely downloaded with new ideas. About 100 years ago, this big organization with many branches, they wanted to rule the world basically using Britain as a nucleus of a system, an embryo, which also was going to be joined with the US under the Anglo-American establishment, wrote about the kind of culture and the changes of culture over a 100-year period that they would actually design, implement and bring in. And H.G. Wells talked about it too. He talked about arenas. He says arenas could be put up across the world for sports, for instance. Now at that time, sports was something that children, school children were into. Adults became adults and got onto adult things. So it was unimaginable at the time that people could actually believe that there was even a need for adult sports and entertainment, never mind having arenas built across the world. But he said we can do this and foist basically a sports culture for the males. Using a tribal system, we're all tribal to an extent. That's why we even bother to vote for a tribal leader. This is well understood. That's why we're supplied with these leaders. And because the average man was to become more disengaged from his own destiny as the expert class arose, it was decided that the males would get their outlet basically, gradually becoming helpless as males, through sports. Therefore they'd have a tribal team they could identify with, they could cheer them on as they were winning. In their own personal lives, they were getting nowhere. They were getting disenfranchised in a sense as experts took over decision-making for them in all kinds of fields. So this was psychology at use, planned before they even implemented the sports. When radio came along, of course, they used that to the maximum. Sports for the men, soaps basically for the women, and then in came television, as I say, with its alpha state, its hypnotic state. And sure enough, around the 1960s, really, 50s and 60s, it took off. It really, really took off. And men became glued on Saturday nights to the sports shows. A culture industry, which is called by its own the culture industry. The Soviet Union had a department called the culture industry. Their actors and directors were called the cultural leaders, because they would, like a computer, people are like computers, all you have to do is keep giving them new updates every so often, and you can change an entire country or a nation or a block of nations who are all getting the same upgrades at the same time along certain paths. Today we call it political correctness. Most people want to belong to their peer group. They want to be the same as everyone else when it comes to opinions. In fact, they judge their own personal sanity by bouncing ideas off their neighbors and friends who will answer back and agree on these same topics in kind. It doesn't matter if the topics or what you're given are facts or utter nonsense, as long as everyone agrees at the same time. You'll say, well, I'm sane, and your friends will all agree because they've had the same information given to them.
But they've been programmed, and I'm sad because I know that it's hard for people like that to take an interest, a serious interest in world affairs, to take a serious interest in what their elected officials are doing. And they're not going to be really inclined to study or discover the deception that's being used against them. And so I'm sad because I see all of that in a flash in my mind as being an indication of how easy it is for the masses to be manipulated.
He says, eventually they'll be unable to think or reason for themselves. And eventually, he said, they will expect the media to do all their thinking and reasoning for them. Well, that's happened today. That's why people today can't think outside of the programming from television.
In the first months of my administration, to pull our economy... Oh, goodness. Sorry about that, guys. To pull our economy back from the brink, including the largest and most sweeping economic recovery plan in our nation's history.